Welcome into the DNVR Rockies podcast. Still going this offseason, still presented to you by Strava Craft Coffee. You got to remember to use that promo code DNVR20 because you'll save 20% off your entire purchase of that CBD infused, a deliciously rich and potentially life-altering Strava Craft Coffee. I'm still drinking mine hot. I drink mine hot through the summer. I am a hot coffee drinker. That is the way that I go. People often ask me if I would prefer, can I get that iced for you? And my answer is always no. It drives my girlfriend crazy. She doesn't understand what it is I'm doing, drinking hot coffee in the summer with my Strava in there, CBD infused. It's how I roll. Are you an iced coffee guy, Patrick?
Hot coffee in the summer? Yes, please. Also, I'm also a hot man myself. However, I did have an iced coffee on Saturday, kind of just a weird special occasion. I happened to be with some family. We were socially distanced. They wanted some iced. I said, okay, I'll go with a nitro. But ultimately, yeah, I'm down with the hot stuff, and especially if it's Strava, sign me up.
Yeah. Cold coffee is now the cold brew down at the DNVR bar. One exception. That stuff's very good, but cold coffee in general, it's weird to me. It's very. Yeah, I'm not about. Hey, well, you know us. We're Drew Creasman and Patrick Lyons. We're your hosts for, as I said, continuing through this offseason of talking Rockies baseball, other baseball, baseball adjacent things, maybe occasionally just sharing with you some stuff that we're enjoying in our lives. But we do want to discuss some things today that we got incredibly wrong. Maybe one or two things that we got a little bit right. Talk about some of our hits and misses in terms of our predictions and even our bets earlier in the season. And as always, especially if you're here for the lives and you come by on the YouTube and you subscribe to that and you click that bell icon and you know when we're going live, you can ask us questions and help direct how the conversation is going to go throughout these days. But Patrick, of course, the big really frustrating is that you and I were kind of talking about this last night. The big over-under, of course, was the Rockies win total on DraftKings before the season, which somehow I don't get this, how they managed to get this. They set it at 26.5, and it came down to whether or not they won the last game of the season, which they did not, and so they fell into the under.
So believe it or not, it wasn't just the people of Denver that were hardcore Rockies fans watching that game. It was the entirety of Las Vegas, Nevada, looking to see what would happen. And they probably felt pretty good when it was 11-0 early on there. It wasn't quite, having anything to do with the umpires making any calls one way or the other. Might not be able to say that it was the case in the NBA Western Conference Finals. That's a horse of a different color. But yeah, it's crazy how all of those ups and downs that the Rockies had this season, where it was they were the world beaters for the first 2 weeks, the world beat upon them for the next two, and okay, they were league average, they're the 6th seed, they're the 8th seed, they're out of it, they're taking 2 out of 3 in LA against the Dodgers, and lo and behold, as you said, comes down to the final day of the season, and it was an under.
It blows my mind because you could not possibly have known all of the things that were going to happen with this team, from Nolan Arenado and his shoulder and his lack of offensive production down to even positive things like Daniel Bard being awesome, that nobody bet money on that. I'm sure Daniel Bard's mother thought he was going to have a very nice season. The rest of us had no clue. Bud Black wasn't sure. They didn't know what they were getting in Daniel Bard. So, so many things that, not having Scott Oberg around, but getting production out of Yency Almonte, getting nothing out of Ryan McMahon. But Raimel Tapia hits 321. And all these things end up balancing to right about where Vegas thought they would be. Though you've got to believe that with a healthy Arenado, they at least get 2 or 3 games over that thing. It's pretty frustrating to see it come down and so many people say, see, that's who they truly are, when you just go, man, I feel like that number would have been lower if they'd have told us before the season Nolan's just not going to be there, or he's going to be hurt all year or whatever.
At some point in the season, Las Vegas must have felt really good to know, okay, Nolan's banged up. Oh, he's not going to be producing. And then they kind of get their streams crossed and say, wait a minute, they cloned Arenado. Wait, how is this? And he's allowed to play first base at the same time. He's got 15 RBIs since August 25th. No, it's his cousin Josh Fuentes. Well, you can't do that.
Yeah.
Easy, Las Vegas. Easy. No, they're playing within the rules there.
Especially because only one of them was producing at a time. They can figure out how to get them going. Now we'll have to figure out whether or not there's a Space Jam situation going on there. There's a few others that I do want to get into, but since Henry's here with a couple of great questions, let's dive into this one really quick. Actually, these are intense, man. So top 3 priorities the Rockies could deal with the offseason pretty much underway, and who to cheer for in the postseason. I'll start with the second one first, just because I like the Blue Jays, just because I'm a child of 90s baseball and all their kids are playing on that team. And I don't like we talked about this on the Denver Sports Podcast a week or two ago about bandwagoning onto a new fan base of some great organization that's super awesome. Like, cool, great. I mean, as tempting as it would be to, root for the Yankees because of DJ and Otto, I guess, and Mike Tauchman, if you're into that, though he hasn't really been contributing. But if you want more of a fun team, a kind of spoiler underdog story to root for that's got a bunch of fun players and nobody that you've got to worry, if I get too attached to this team, am I going to feel bad about playing against them next year? The Rockies hardly ever play the Blue Jays, so you don't have to worry about any of that. Like, I think that's a good team to pick.
Yeah, no, you're right. You said it on Sunday's podcast, and it's hard to argue with that. My inclination, there's only one team in the National League that's, I guess, exciting enough to maybe root for, but in Colorado, I think, legally speaking, we'd have to maybe contact Governor Polis if you would be allowed to root for the Padres.
Right.
I'm thinking you probably can't. So since you can't root for them, the AL is kind of loaded with those interesting teams. Toronto, obviously, the most interesting of all of them. The Yankees, there are those guys, LeMahieu, Ottavino, Rex Brothers. Chris Iannetta hung up his boots with the Yankees. So depending on how deep you want to go, there are some guys there. The A's, you saw them a bunch. Arenado's, buddy and Matt Chapman.
They're fun.
I think he's done for, but he'll get the ring even if he doesn't return. The White Sox are incredibly fun. They've got all those Cuban players. Again, there's a connection with Nolan. I'm a big proponent of the Twins. I find them to be one of the better and more exciting teams. So, and I think that's your safe pick is you go to the American League so that if someone does too well here in the playoffs and then NL, then you're kind of stuck because you can't root for them any further, right? You can't buy any of their World Series merchandise or whatever because they're going to come to town next year. You might not be there, but they're going to play the Rockies next year. So it's safe to look over there in the American League. And if you want to wait past this first wild card series round to say, okay, now there's only 4 left, we won't hold that against you just to make sure if there's, I like the A's and I like the White Sox. Well, one of them's going to lose. So maybe I reserve my decision to choose one of them until this weekend when those series wrap up.
Yeah, it's going to get brutal out there for a minute. You pick just one team, and your playoff experience might end very quickly. But yeah, I've always liked the Twins as well, and this would be a great. Well, I don't know that it would be. I kind of wrote in our FCA the other day in our Falls Count Anywhere, right? That I think really the 2 best outcomes are that the Dodgers finally win it. So you can just say they have it, but you also get to squint at them. You also get to put that little in your mind. You get to say, yeah. You got one, and you almost hope that like cosmically or karmically that resets their clock for another 30 years before they can win a World Series. Or the other way is total chaos, just absolute nonsense bananas. The Miami Marlins over the Toronto Blue Jays in the World Series or something like that. Just.
I did the math today and I didn't get a chance to tweet it out, but if the Brewers go to I'm not going to say game 7 because this opening wild card round is only 3 games. Like, that's what's insane is the Brewers just have to win 2 out of 3 against the Dodgers. And just like that, the team with the best record in baseball this year is gone. Like, that's fun talking about it right now, but that shouldn't happen.
No.
And I really hope it doesn't. I know that sounds crazy to say you hope the Dodgers win, but go ahead and lose in the division series where at least it's a best out of 5. But if the Brewers take it to game 3, game 5, game 7, and game 7, and they win it all, they will finish with only 2 more wins than losses over the course of the entire season. So the team that wins the World Series, we're basically 500. Like, that's mind-blowing to think of it in that perspective. And yet they have just as much chance as a team that won, I think, 26 more games than they lost in the Dodgers.
See, the only reason I would want that to happen is for the what I assume would be rightful response to it, which is where everyone would go, well, that was silly, and we can't do that again. And all of this talk of, like, let's maybe expand the playoffs permanently, and let's just do this all the time, will just go away because we will all look at the World Series champion and go, we all agree that was dumb. They agree it was dumb. The Brewers don't think that they deserve to be the World Series champions, or if the Marlins, who nearly wrecked the season at the beginning, I've had to play 56 different guys throughout the year. If they were to just get hot and find their way into the World Series championship, I think we could all collectively go, okay, that's not how baseball should operate. And that's kind of why, because this is our one-off, right? You have to. You and I have talked about this a lot lately, and this is actually a big conversation going on with how you analyze teams, players, everything this year is how do you use the small sample size data, and how do you avoid the bias of, well, it didn't work out, so we've got to do something else, or it did work out, so that's exactly what we should do. And it goes the same for some of these rules. If the my one concern about a postseason that plays out, pure chalk or whatever, and we get Dodgers versus Yankees in the World Series, is the people go, see, you guys were worried about nothing. The best teams will win in the end. It doesn't matter if it's a 3-game set and they have to play the Marlins first. They can knock out those teams easily. And it's like a 1-year sample is just not enough to know one way or the other. But people are going to take it that way one way or the other. So I want it to go the other way.
Yeah, Brewers Blue Jays is not really going to get great ratings there. Oh, you mean Brandon Woodward is starting against Ross Stripling in Game 1 of the World Series? I need to tune into that one.
Big Corbin Burns guy.
Maybe even better than the Dodgers winning it all, because you're like, okay, they get it out of the way, and then it's not like they're going to give up. It's not like they're going to win and go, you know what? Let's try to save some money now a little bit. They're still going to be pushing, but okay, fine. That kind of ends that passion, maybe just a little bit. So that does make sense. But maybe it would sting even more if the Padres won the World Series. So not only do they win do they win the World Series in a year of the pandemic, but they don't get to have the parade.
Right.
And every time someone brings up Game 163 and talks anything about Matt Holliday touching or not touching home plate, you just go, 60 games, man. 60 games.
You won a World Series in less than half a season. Get out of here.
Yeah. Enjoy those Brown World Series rings. Okay. 60 games. 60 games, Padres fans. That might be even sweeter.
Well, Patrick, if I had a Breck brew, now would be a good time to crack open it, because we've still got the other half of Henry's question to answer that thing. I could head on down to the DNVR bar. I could go over to the farmhouse. Either way, I'm getting myself a nice and tasty Breck brew. You can get food with it and $5 off if you use that code DNVR down at the farmhouse. Really great place to hang out, whether you're getting the carry out or you're sitting at their very beautiful outdoor, socially distanced dining that they've got going on now. Also, just get a 15-can sampler at your King Soopers or wherever around. Bring it home, try them out. Breck brew, throw them back, and answer for yourself Henry's first part of this question before we get back into the bets that we did and did not get correctly. What could be? That's an interesting way. He did not say what should be, so I'm going to get overly pedantic and philosophical on you here. He said, what could be the Rockies' top 3 priorities with the offseason pretty much underway here, Patrick. I'll let you give me one. Why don't you give me 1, 2, and I'll give 1 or 2, and then we'll see if we've got them in here. Narrow down 3.
I think the biggest priority you have to address, and again, this is one of those things that will not come across in a news release, like signing a free agent or making a trade. Very clearly you go, oh, this is what's happening, or this is what has happened. What the Rockies need to do this offseason is find out, Nolan, what's going on? Find out his headspace. Figure out what's going on with him, because he represents so much to the franchise, both on the field talent, both the payroll with how much they're going to pay, and the future of the organization as far as, whether or not you're willing to deal with, a relationship that can be tumultuous at times, just to ensure that the next Hall of Famer that gets in, and well, maybe it's the next because it could and should be Todd Helton, but that the next one is a Rocky for his entire career. You just have to figure out what's going on with that, and that's first and foremost to all of it, because every question that comes after that is, if you're keeping him, how much do you have to make him happy? What does he need, or what does he want to be made happy? And do you feel, and by you, it's Dick Monfort, do you feel that, you can keep this guy around and still be able to have this working and professional relationship with the general manager? And for all intents and purposes, they did work out okay this year, but they are very much in the same predicament that they were last offseason. Now, maybe doesn't quite come to blows like it may or may not have last year. Maybe we won't hear quite as much through the media about comments about each guy, sharing their side of the argument and whatnot. But nevertheless, it hasn't been healed. Nothing has been repaired. Had they gone on a deep playoff run, Nolan would have been able to kind of put a lot of this behind him and say, man, we're bringing all of these guys back next year. Yeah, maybe it's only one more year of our window with Story and Gray as a free agent, but you know what? Things are good. So there is so much that you have to shore up. Nolan, figure out where his head's at. And even after you do that, you got to figure out, do you want to still do business with this guy and everything that he brings? And that's not to make him a villain in any way, but that's just saying, look, if you want to keep dealing with this conversation or dealing with, this issue of, is he going to leave, or is he frustrated? Is he bringing, some bad chemistry into the clubhouse? We all know he brings great chemistry into the clubhouse as far as getting guys to work incredibly hard, do their best. Troy Tulowitzki was that kind of guy, and it worked for a very long period of time. It worked when he went to Toronto. So Nolan Arenado is, he's still a first ballot Hall of Famer, but do you want the first ballot Hall of Famer for the next 7 years, or are you trying to win a World Series? And you might not be able to do both those things at the same time.
Right. And you've got to answer all those questions. You've got to figure that out with him. I think there's absolutely a way they can do both of those things at the same time, but the only way they can do both of those things at the same time is if they're on the same page. And if that means that Nolan Arenado's never going to be on the same page with Jeff Bridich and that there's no way to mend that, then Patrick's absolutely correct. And those two things are incompatible goals, keeping Nolan Arenado long-term and winning a World Series. If you can mend that, whether that means the two of them or the three of them, if you want to include Dick Monfort, get together, have a powwow, release a statement, whether we believe it or not, and then there's nothing else beyond that other than them making moves, presumably, that make him happy. And honestly, even a step back and say, like, from a making moves standpoint, I would more often than not, in fact, I vociferously argued against this position to Manny Randhawa last offseason. I don't think you should run your franchise based on what one star player thinks you should do. On the other hand, at this particular moment in time, if taking one or two of his suggestions. Whatever Nolan Arenado's suggestions are for free agents aren't going to work out worse than the last crop of guys. They're just not. So unless, you don't let him spend the entire free agent budget or make all the decisions, but saying, yeah, you know what? If letting you weigh in on one or two of these moves and us going through with something you said, I like this reliever, then sign him. And if that guy doesn't work out, no one gets to fault you for that. That's just the way that it goes. But so those are the kinds of things I agree. Priority one has got to be coming to terms with Nolan Arenado, whatever that means, moving on from him or finding a way to make him happy. If you try to strike that middle ground of, we'll just keep him around and he'll play good and we'll figure out everything else without having to worry too much about him, you're going to have the same problems, or a lot of the same problems next year that you did this year.
Yeah, it's a difficult predicament that they're in, and it's like careful what you wish for, because they've got this superstar guy, but you can't win with one superstar. Look at the Los Angeles Angels. I mean, they've surrounded Mike Trout with players of the same similar caliber of a Trevor Story. I mean, okay, they went out and they spent big money on Anthony Rendon. Boom, that makes sense. At the beginning of Trout's run, they went and signed Albert Pujols, so they check that box off for Charlie Blackmon if you want, in a roundabout way. So they've spent their money. The Angels have spent their money to try to support Mike Trout, and it just hasn't worked out for them. And that's probably why on Sunday, on the final day of the regular season, they got rid of their general manager, Billy Epler.
Yeah. But they also, spent way more money to do it. Like, I get what you're getting at there, but it's not the same situation. Like, those are very different situations. And Will, I don't know. I had heard all of the reports that Nolan Arenado was a big fan of Daniel Murphy and that he was a big fan of that signing when it happened. I don't know that he was a guy they particularly wanted him to go out and get, but I also know that Nolan's had some interesting notions of how to build teams in the past as well, and including wanting like veteran starting pitching when the team traded Tulo, which was just like, one, not how that works, and two, not available. So you got to be careful letting him make moves for the team, but you do have to make him happy. There's no way around it. You just have to make him happy, or you have to trade him. Those are the two options that are good for the franchise.
And it feels like that's number one. And I think you said as much. Like, that's number one. And then numbers 2 and 3 are just as valuable as one. Like, that's 50% of this offseason, I think, in a lot of ways, is that number one. And then you've got numbers 2 and 3 as far as what else they should make their priority.
Yeah, and I think number 2, and we've talked about this a lot, has got to be a philosophical shift that, again, is going to be difficult to measure. So our 1 and 2 here are a little bit ambiguous and difficult to measure. How will we know if they've come to terms with Nolan Arenado? We likely won't know for sure unless they do come out and release some sort of statement. How will we know if they've really made a strong enough philosophical push into the future in terms of investing more money in analytics, bringing in more coaches, committing to new ways of approaching the game? I wrote about some of them recently. I've talked about them before. The way they play their outfield, the way they take a certain approach on the road. There's all kinds of things that, so again, this can be a bit amorphous and ambiguous, but they essentially need to dramatically ratchet up their analytics and get more into the new age of baseball thinking.
What's crazy about Henry's original question is, what could be the top 3 priorities, or the top 3 things that they do, what could be. And if you know your history, or you've been listening to the DNVR Rockies podcast for the past 2 years, you know that in the past 2 off seasons, their priorities were one thing, and that was signing Daniel Murphy. So we could talk all day about what you or I, Drew and myself, we would do, or maybe what they should do and what other teams have done to improve. But they could do nothing, which is crazy.
Well,
But it
sure,
is
but
not shocking.
actually, that's not true. That's actually not true. They can't do nothing. They literally can't do nothing. There are too many open spots on the roster. They're going to have to sign guys. They're not going to run out there with a roster that's entirely of basically dudes who are currently in their minor leagues right now. Like, we're not going to see Antonio Santos and Chichi Gonzalez and these guys filling out the roster next year. With $55 million of free space and roster spots that need to be filled, it would be almost impossible for them to do absolutely nothing in the offseason.
Well, that's how much they would have available in the normal world. We're not in the normal world, so that number could potentially be smaller. Also, we've talked about this before, this idea that, I think, Dick Monfort's is a money man, and he's running his team like a business, which a lot of owners do across all sports. And there's nothing wrong with that. And I think in a lot of ways, that's what's made being a Rockies fan so great, because they don't tank. And I'm a proponent of that. And you know what? You don't have to worry about losing 100 games in a season if you're a Rockies fan with Dick Monfort at the helm. He's not going to allow that to happen, because that's not how he wants to run his business. And I respect that. That being said, if he laid out this plan of, here's how much money we're going to spend between 2018 and 2020. How would you like to do this, Jeff? I think, for one, Jeff said, well, Jimmy, give me all that money right now, and let's load up that bullpen with 3 fantastic arms, which at least 2 of them were at the time. And you know what? We'll just go out and we'll shove and we'll be dominant. And then when people are coming out and we're selling out every game at Coors Field like it's the mid-90s, then that's how we're going to be able to have even more money in the coffers to go out and get some free agents at the trade deadline. So I can have my cake and eat it too. I just need all that money up front to do that, because this team is a contender. But if this team is no longer truly a contender, either by Dick Monfort's standards or by Jeff Bridich standards, and I don't think Jeff Bridich is ready to tap out on this, group of guys just yet, they might hedge their bet and they might not spend all of that money. They might spend some of it, but they might not spend all of it. And they might spend some of it.
They're not going to spend $0 of it. They're not going to spend 0 of it. They might spend.
What if they sign 5 guys for $15 million? That's not really spending a lot of money. I think they're going to get away with quote unquote spending money by re-signing Trevor Story, possibly, or John Gray. And so
Trevor Story doesn't affect. I mean,
I know that. I know that.
No, I know, but no. Okay. The $55 million I'm talking about is just for next season, and then a lot more actually. Now, depending on if they extend guys in the meantime, would come off.
I know that
for the year following. I know. I just want the people who are listening to know that what you're suggesting is remarkably unlikely. The idea that
I don't think that it is unlikely.
No money.
This team signed one free agent in the past 2 seasons.
They didn't have any money to spend based on their budget that they'd put out before. They have, based on that same budget, at least $55 million to spend. They've never, ever in their history just not spent that money.
In a non-pandemic world, I would agree with you at $55 million. So because it's less, I think they could get creative. And I just think that they could work around it.
If the economics are tight because of the pandemic and people are doing things differently, they're doing things differently. But that's not based on what you were just saying of, well, they had all this money to spend, but that was because they were contenders. And now that they're not contenders, they're not going to spend that money, or that they're going to try to convince people that because they've extended Trevor Story that they've spent money. First of all, people are smarter than that. They can see through that. That's not how it works. That wouldn't increase the budget for next season. They've got budget to increase for next season, and they've got spots on their roster that they need to fill. Like
I agree.
The chances that
it's not far-fetched. You really think that's far-fetched?
I do.
That idea?
I do.
Okay.
I think I don't think the Colorado Rockies are very likely to go out and make no moves beyond re-signing their own guys, maybe 1 or 2 mid-level veteran guys, and calling it good and coming back next year with a lower payroll than they had this year.
So what would be a number? What would be a number that you would consider, quote unquote, they spent no money? Because right, I agree they're going to spend at least 15 million. But if they spend 25 or less, will you consider that as like, they really didn't spend?
I would still, I mean, that would be on the low end. I would say I expect them to spend more than that.
So you think they'll spend at least $25 million?
And an increase of next year's budget? Yeah. Again, they just always have. They've never spent it well, but they've never had money to spend and gone into an offseason and been like, we're going to save it for a rainy day. Sometimes maybe they probably should. Sometimes maybe they should leave it so that they could make a deadline deal, so that they could acquire a contract at the deadline, which is something they're almost never in a position to do. Think about when you talk about the offseason of the super bullpen. One of the trade deadline deals that they were semi-interested in that year that they couldn't get done because they had all these bullpen guys under contract, if you'll recall, was JD Martinez, who ended up going to the Arizona Diamondbacks. And if they didn't have, say, Brian Shaw, it's entirely possible that they could have maybe made a move like that. But no, again, it's just like, I think if we're going to rightfully criticize the Rockies for doing a lot of the same things over and over and over again, which they do, and we have criticized them as such, then we've also got to give them credit for the ways in which they've been consistent. And one of the ways in which they've been consistent is spending all of their money in an offseason when they've got money to spend.
Yeah. And I, for one, was not criticizing them. I was simply purporting this idea to Henry's question that they could do next to nothing. I think the payroll, the last 2 years were obviously at an all-time high, $178 million in 2019. This year, $182 million before obviously the prorated pay. But I think it's going to probably come down to around 160, to be honest. That still means they spend that 20 to 25 million, maybe a little bit less, but it just wouldn't shock me. It just wouldn't shock me if that was the case.
Yeah, and I guess, and we really don't know what the
right, exactly,
pandemic, especially with the pandemic.
And you would understand it too. It's still frustrating, but you would understand it. Like, hey man, you don't want to. Everything that Dick Monfort has built up in this organization and in this town, and everything he's created with Coors Field and Lodo blowing up, like, he deserves credit for that. And is still investing money in this team and wants to, but he needs to be financially prudent to make sure that he doesn't go bankrupt. I don't know what his money situation is like, but again, you make a wrong move, it could be disastrous for years, decades to come. And again, that's if you can win a World Series and throw all that and say, who cares? We'll figure it out later. Or you say, you know what, maybe now's not the time to go all in. But if you go all in, you do have a decent shot at doing something next year.
See, that's the thing is, like, you've so I hope there's somebody in there making the point that you've made so well on this podcast, because it's like that would be such short-sighted thinking. And I think here's what I really believe.
What would be short-sighted? To go all in and like just sign everybody, or sign
for him to sign nobody, to believe that he's got to tighten his belt now during tight times because times are tight and you don't know what the future's going to. And like you said, totally justifiable, totally understandable, and most teams are probably going to be doing that. You'll only be able to criticize them so much, but you're right. Now is a unique time to get investments that you're not going to be able to find at other times. Because other teams are doing that, you're going to be able to get players, particularly the Colorado has never been able to go out and get before. The Coors Field tax may be less if there are some teams who just aren't signing anybody. These guys want to play. And so I'm with you. And I do think that the frustrating thing will be, it'll be a middle ground. It won't be the all-in type of thing that you and I, if we were in charge of the money, whatever the budget was, that we would just go out and get as many dudes as possible to bring in and try to run with this thing, because you're going to find some good deals out there. There are going to be great deals to be had this offseason. And there are enough of them that could be a supporting cast that gets the core of Nolan Arenado, Trevor Story, Charlie Blackmon, Armen Marquez, Kyle Freeland, Antonio Senzatella, etc., into the postseason, into where they should be. But I think that they'll probably go a sort of middle ground in between those two things. I think they'll spend the money. I just don't think that they'll spread it out quite as much as I would. They'll pour it into a couple of guys, and then once again, our hopes will be riding on 3 players, and 2 of them will probably be people that fans like, oh, really? you know? And I think that's the most likely outcome, but we got to find out.
Yeah, precisely right. I mean, we've got a long off season to deal with, and there's more free agents too than in years past. Maybe not more exciting, but there are more free agents because, as you know, we've seen the last couple of years, there were those conversations if there was collusion and guys getting all these short-term deals. So signing 1 and 2 year deals means they're going to be back on the free agent market once again, and we're even seeing players that are under team control for a year or two becoming free agents because their arbitration numbers just a little bit too high. That was the deal with Chad Bettis and Tyler Anderson. So there's a lot of guys that you could speculate on and get some bargains. And, you know, the Rockies also got Elias Diaz. I mean, they signed him as a free agent, didn't spend any money on him, but that seemed to work out okay. And you can do that, again, because there are those guys. That kind of goes back to why I could see that. I could see it happening where you can still improve the roster, but not spend that money. So I don't know. We'll see what happens. We got a month. We have a month until the World Series ends before that first contract is signed. But man, it's going to be fun speculating.
Do a bunch of that. It could be worse things to do too. Like you said, you get flexibility, but I want to speculate on some of the going big possibilities as well. Let's finish this off, man. This ended up being a long one. It's actually a great question though to start off our kind of off-season talk. So thanks, Henry, for throwing that one out there. The third priority, if we wanted to get a little more specific, if these sort of big philosophical answers haven't really been doing it for you, I would just say the bullpen. just let's get some relievers in here. I don't know what else to tell y'all. The bullpen was an absolute disaster, and it can't be that. There are problems in the rest of the team, but something I feel like I've said many times on this podcast, and in the 7 or 8 years that I've been doing this, like, baseball is unique in that the entire game at some point will be in the hands of a person who hasn't been playing in the game that entire time and will only be out there to get 3 outs. And unless your starter's really good, that's going to happen 3 times a game. And so, yeah, do the Rockies need more depth in their offense? Sure. Could they stand to go get another starter to solidify that bullpen? Absolutely. Could they get new coaches and do all the other stuff? Yeah, you can. But you can be the best baseball team in every other aspect. And if every time you get to the 7th inning, you've got to hand the ball to a guy with a 6.50 ERA, you're bad. You're a bad baseball team, and you can only go so far. So I don't know what the answer is, but you got to fix the bullpen, Patrick. So, yeah, to answer your question, Henry, we just gave about 2,000 words on Nolan Arenado. Then the second thing that they could do is a combination of the philosophical approach to different things, analytics being one of them, and what they can do in free agency. There's another 1,000 words on those topics. And then just bullet point, the bullpen. Fix the bullpen. Need we say more? That's how we're going out on that topic. It's bad. It's bad bullpen, man. Hey, you know what's not bad? Playing a little WGT golf over at DNVRgolf.com. Actually, you don't play it at DNVRgolf.com. You download it totally for free there. You get it on your phone or on your computer. You just tap away at that little golf ball thing. It's really enjoyable. If you want to get deep into it, it can be super competitive as well. We do enjoy having our tournaments here at DNVR. Just had a big, huge major this weekend with $200 cash prize for first place and a second place cash prize of $100. Third place got a DNVR shirt, a hat, and a sticker pack. And again, that's for playing a free video game that's totally fun to just hang out and do. Plus, you get to talk trash to us and the DNVR staff or other people in the DNVR community. Join us in our clubhouses. Again, who is it there? Nick Denver
he was the big winner. $200 for playing a video game. Every kid's dream.
It's all I've ever wanted, man. That's all I've ever wanted in life. You will not see my name on the leaderboard there.
Same.
Once we brought out the cash prize, I feel like the real pros really came out, tested it off. People were practicing and stuff. I was like, ooh, I'm going to get crushed. And it did. But it's a whole lot of fun. Like I said, download it totally for free at DNVRGolf.com. All right, Patrick, before we close out of here, do you want to do another bet or two that we did or did? I know our other big one that we didn't get was Trevor Story leading the league in runs. That was one we were real hyped on. And for the first half of the season, he was there. He was doing the thing, even without Nolan Arenado driving him in much. And then, as we all know, along with everything else in the Rockies season, it all went to hell. That one didn't end up working either.
It did. Scored 41 runs. I was tied for 12th. Freddie Freeman ultimately led the league, led the game with 51 runs. Tatis Jr. was second with 50. So he was definitely in that running for that 3,000 plus 3,000 payout. The two other Rockies ones that we had discussed besides the 26.5 was Charlie Blackmon being the hits leader. Now, Charlie, man, that one again looked great.
Looks great.
That one looked great. And you know what? The one thing that's cool that I didn't realize, and is probably not a thing in the real world if you're going to a casino or whatnot. But the cool thing with the DraftKings Sportsbook app is, depending on what kind of a bet you've made and how far along it is, they can sometimes want to hedge their bet and go, crap, dude, you made a really good bet. Look, we'll give you this much money so that we don't have to pay you that much money. And it's kind of a win-win. And if that was the case with Trevor Story at one point, you'd have felt good. If that was the case when Charlie Blackmon's batting 500,
you could have bought out big.
You walked away with some money and you go, I could have had more if I waited, but doesn't matter. You won. That's how I look at stuff like that. I'm not okay. I'm okay with not playing the lottery if I can have something else a little lower down that's more guaranteed. So you could have had, a nice little payout. Trey Turner had the most hits, 78. And incidentally, if Blackmon would have gotten 79 hits, he only would have been hitting 357. That's it.
Yeah.
He really took a tumble there. So even to say what would the difference have mattered? It really wasn't, too many points and very, not very far to what it was before that. The other one we kept an eye on was Germán Marquez as a potential strikeout leader. That was plus 10,000, which was a lot. And, he ended up, I think, finishing in somewhere maybe in the top 15 or whatever. And he had those moments. He had those flashes. But some of the ones that I felt good about that I ended up winning was I like the head-to-heads. You had two teams. So one was Minnesota and Atlanta. And I thought Minnesota would have more wins than Atlanta, and it was very close, 36-35. Ooh. So I ended up winning that at minus 136. Cleveland over Boston, I thought was the easiest one, and it was 35-24. I didn't like Boston, and it doesn't matter that Boston only had 24. I just didn't think they were that good, to begin with, just in general. And once they sold off all their pieces, it made it all the more easier. Yeah. And then I was wrong about Milwaukee. I thought Milwaukee would have more wins than Cincinnati. They only had 29. Cincinnati did have 31.
Milwaukee. We've got time in the next couple of days. I've wondered a little bit what's gone on with Milwaukee over there, because it's a talented team. We saw them in the NLDS just a couple of years ago. They continue to build and be good and be one of those teams right in the mix for these last several years. Solid core, great bullpen, and that's one of the reasons why they've managed to hang around. So I'm gonna have to dig into that a little bit.
Yeah, for American League Cy Young Award, I had as a long shot that I just like the numbers. Plus 10,000 was Dallas Keuchel. He went 6-2 with a 1.99 ERA and a 1.8 FWAR. Hey. I don't think he's going to win it, but man, that's about as close as you could come. I think his teammate Lucas Giolito might get maybe more nod. He did throw that no-hitter, which was another one I got wrong. I said there was not going to be any no-hitters. I said there. I just didn't like what was going to happen. There were two, both in Chicago, or both by Chicago players. So I did have that one wrong, but that one was fairly close, I think, with Keuchel. I know he might get some votes. And then the final ones were these real fun over-unders on home runs.
Yeah.
So I took a loss on Cody Bellinger. I said it was a lock that he would get over 14.5. He had 12.
Yeah, he started slow, man. Those first 2 weeks or 3 weeks, that killed you there with Cody Bellinger one.
Mike Trout over under 15.5. Now he did miss some time for the birth of his first child. I said it was going to be a lock that he took the over, and he did. He did hit 17, so that was a win.
Yeah.
Bryce Harper 14.5 home runs. Took the loss on that. He only hit 13. And then finally Juan Soto, which I felt really good about, 13.5 home runs. I took the under because there was no Anthony Rendon. I just thought that lineup was really weak. He still squeaked out 13, so I did get a win. But that kid is both A, a kid, and B, really friggin' good.
Yeah. And he can hit, and he can field. He's a great ball player. I love Juan Soto.
Yeah.
He's fantastic.
We did have 3 pitchers. We did have 3 pitchers that went over 100 strikeouts. That was the other big one.
I was going to say, on the home runs, did you have someone to do over 20? I couldn't remember if you did that one either.
I said no.
Yeah. I think both of it. I thought there was a chance, but I wasn't ready to put my money there. And a couple of people did, right?
Well, Tatis Jr. he was the one that was getting closest. The guys that they had, I think there might have been, I don't know if there were, I just have 5 written down. I don't know that they had many more than that. So they just wanted the big players. That was Pete Alonso, Cody Bellinger, Joey Gallo, Giancarlo Stanton, and Mike Trout. So Trout hit 17, Alonso 16, Betts hit 16, Bellinger 12, Gallo only hit 10, but only one man hit 20. Luke Voit, 22 home runs.
The man, the myth, the legend, Luke Voit.
So if you bet, and I don't know if you were able to bet no, like say no, this guy can't hit 20, but if you bet no on all of those big name guys, you ended up winning. And 3 guys did have 100 strikeouts. You have Trevor Bauer, 100 on the button. You know he was gunning for that.
Yeah.
The DeGrominator, 104, and everyone's favorite pop superstar, Shane Bieber, with a whopping 122 strikeouts. He's going game 1 against Garrett Cole, who had 94, so he just missed out. That's going to be a good one tomorrow.
It's going to be good stuff. All right, well, we're going to check in on some of that. We're going to be watching baseball here over the next couple of days, talking baseball with all of you. I saw that there were questions here from Wildly Innocent and Will about the budget and the TV situation. And honestly, we need to get all of that information first. We need to gather all of that news. It needs to be made public. We need to get some information about it. We don't have the details on those things. Hopefully, in the coming days, we will get them and we will pass them along to all of you. In the meantime, all we can do is speculate, which is also fun. In the meantime, let's just all hang out, watch some baseball, have fun. Follow us on social media at Drew Creasman, at Patrick Lyons, at DNVR_Rockies. You got to give a subscribe to the DNVR.com so you don't miss out on any of that written content. Plus, you get discounts on hats, shirts, masks. You get a bigger beer when you come on down to the DNVR bar. And you just get to say you're a part of one of the coolest sports communities in the world. We know that you will all continue to be absolutely awesome out there. We will continue to be absolutely Patrick Lyons and Drew Creasman in here. And until next time, we will see you at the ballpark.